Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special episode of Zebra Breaks right here on youtube.com/Zebra Breaks. I am referee Brandon Toll, and I am joined by a friend and a fellow wrestling collector, Adam Gellman. My friend, welcome to Zebra Breaks.
Thank you for having me. It's, glad to be on. It's been a crazy couple of days, right?
It's been a dumpster fire, I think, and that's being disrespectful to dumpsters and fires. Given what's gone on, it has been a wild 16 hours, give or take. Because it was right around 4 o'clock Central Time yesterday that this all just started devolving in the situation. And we've talked on for your podcast before in terms of releases. So I wanted to have you on with me to talk about the collector standpoint of what could potentially be going down in this situation. For those who don't know, brief recap: yesterday at about 4 o'clock Central, 5 Eastern, lawsuits dropped from both WWE and Panini in regards to the license. WWE claiming that they are terminating the license outright. And it's going to Fanatics. Panini filing a countersuit and a TRO for a restraining order in due course in the Southern District of New York in Manhattan, and starts the process of trying to fight back, as we were supposedly on paper supposed to have Panini content through the end of 2025. So that is all up in the air at this point, but Adam is one of the most prolific modern collectors that I know, has a massive collection of the man, which after that NXT Women's Championship win a week or so ago was nice. I saw that that custom one you made with that ticket stub. That looks really cool, man. That was really cool for your
Yeah,
collection.
yeah, I was really excited about that.
So
Um,
let's go general impressions first. Let's kind of peel this off like an onion real quick. Give me your general impressions first out of the gate. Given I know you've read the Panini's response along that led to the TRO. I have as well. Just give me your top line impression first up.
well, I think it's interesting because we knew this was coming, just not this soon. And I
Yeah.
think like what surprised me that was that for people who aren't aware, like Fanatics and the leagues themselves, NFL, MLB, NBA, like their Fanatics has secured funding from the league in the different rounds that they've done. The league's own pieces of equity stake in Fanatics. So like if leagues wanting to terminate licenses with Panini or doing whatever to ensure success of things that they have legal ownership stakes in, like that makes sense. Like WWE, like it's a different business type of relationship. And so when you think of like, oh, well, the WWE shop, like all the other merchandising around sports these days, is now a Fanatics experience, like that was always seeming to be like the driving force behind a lot of this. So when you see that all of a sudden the merger closes, it's like a $20 billion whatever merger, it's now Endeavor, and somehow like throughout like a couple of days before that we find out this goes down. Like think about the amount of influence that Michael Rubin needs to potentially have to walk in and say, oh, by the way, we're going to do this. I don't care about all this other stuff that's happening. Terminate the license now. Add to your massive amount of legal work that you have to do for the merger. Add this on. I mean, that's unprecedented. Like I've never seen anything or anyone be able to behave like that, and do so with such really relative impunity in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
To be able to go and literally just dictate the terms of how businesses interact with him, and I think that speaks to his influence around sports. It speaks to his influence around the hobby, and it speaks to the power that the Fanatics brand is going to have across so many different landscapes. And I think my initial take is like, okay, it's not shocking, but it's also like wasn't expected, right?
Yeah, I think my visceral reaction yesterday to it was they didn't go after the NBA license first, because that's a big
I
one.
I think that's probably harder to negotiate those situations. So maybe it's just the meetings got scheduled later. I don't think there was any real order of importance here.
Yeah, I my thought was because I know that they had signed Wembenyama and them to the exclusive deals, and as we get ready to go into a new season, we're going to start ramping up on the 23-24 releases for basketball. Yeah, this one caught me completely off guard. The more I thought about it last night, and I'm just gonna say he's on the bleep around and find out scale right now because you're right. I think you put it in the best way you could. He's acting with impunity. And unfortunately, when you're acting with, in my opinion, when you're acting with this level of impunity, you're on the bleep around and find out scale. And I think this may be where if and I think I talked to Paul Lesko, so I'm going to bring in a little bit of what he kind of from his end, from the legal end, having he's as an active litigator, kind of brought up with this. The devil's going to be in the details. I think that WWE's requests from what we read in the Panini filing was wild. Like
I
you want we're canceling your contract. Oh, by the way, and you're paying us over $5 million. Come
I mean,
on.
like that type of stuff it seems to be pretty standard language. I mean, like the paying the royalties when you cancel something for cause and you're trying you want to recoup your invest like that the payment stuff seems like a settlement piece that you say, okay, well, as part of a settlement, we're not gonna go that direction. But I think what shocked me the most is that like when you look at the grand scheme of this, and WWE is saying, okay, we're going to terminate the contract, and I don't know necessarily if he is going to be on this fuck around and find out sort of scale here, and the reason for that is because he has so much consolidated power already and so many relationships across so many different areas. There's not a lot of people that can bring him to accountability for a lot of the actions that he's taking. And I think he knows that. And I think when you look at the way that this is like they've worded this, they're saying that Panini hasn't lived up to their end of the bargain. They're saying that Panini hasn't grown the hobby or this, that, or the other thing. But then Panini comes back and says, well, we've brought more people, we've hit our minimum guarantees and then some. Like all of the things from a financial and fiscal perspective, like they've done their share.
Yeah.
So if Ruben is using, or if I keep saying Ruben, the only people at parties involved right now are WWE and Panini. Fanatics, we're just assuming is sort of the puppet master behind all of this.
Absolutely.
But in reality, the legal entities in this are WWE and Panini. WWE is saying you haven't hit your end of the bargains and stuff like that, and Panini is saying, well, I wouldn't be so sure. And I think that's where it's going to be a really difficult challenge for WWE to legally hold Panini accountable for breach of contract. Now, where I think that when you mentioned devil is in the details, and this is again, we're very getting into very complicated legal territory here.
Yeah.
Paul is definitely a much more adequate person to deliver this.
Yeah.
I don't think, and here's my take on this, and then I'll let you get back to sort of where we were going with this. If I'm looking at this just objectively, and you have two businesses that are obviously in a fight, and one of them is saying, I don't want to work with you anymore. The other one is saying, oh, no, you can't do that. We have a contract. It seems unlikely that there's going to be an end where they come back together and decide, you know what, let's put all of that behind us. We'll continue to work together. It seems to me this is the end of the road. And it seems to me that there may be some sort of compromise where Panini can release some of the product that they have stored up or whatever. There's some sort of like grace period that is installed. Maybe the royalty payment gets, cut down or something like that. We probably won't learn the details. We'll probably just see the products. I don't think WWE and Panini are going to come back to the table and work together again. So I think if collectors are hoping that there's some positive resolution on the Panini side coming back around here, and I've heard on some of the Facebook forums for people calling into customer service today about redemptions. I'm sure we'll get to that. Like, oh, we're going to meet with WWE in 2 weeks and get this all sorted out. Like, no. Like, this is a legal proceeding at this point. This is going to be insanely complex. There's going to be so many different layers to this. You mentioned, like, let's peel it back like an onion. Like, I think everybody needs to understand, like, this is going to happen in WWE, and it's going to happen months at a time. There's no guarantee Topps is going to jump right in either.
Yeah.
But it's also going to happen in the NBA. It's going to happen in the NFL, and it's going to happen across UFC likely. Like, all of these things are going to bring the hobby likely to a grinding halt because Michael Rubin is Thanos and he's inevitable. Like the Infinity Gauntlet is being assembled.
Yeah, there's a couple of varying things, and I'll kind of first of all, I'll kind of bring in. I took some notes from my interview with Paul Lesko, which, guys, if you get a chance to see that, it's over on top of the card, youtube.com/ad-free shows. It is a lengthy 1 hour plus interview with Paul Lesko, who is, and Gellman knows who he is. I know he is basically the foremost on the legal front when it comes to the hobby. He is a practicing attorney, and he collects specifically cards that are
Awesome.
hobby related. It's fantastic because his collection is wild for some of the stuff that you see, especially stuff in the past 12 months in terms of litigation. It's been pretty interesting. But Paul kind of laid a couple things out just to kind of nuts and bolts it. I gotta figure out how to kind of condense this down. As much as it may be WWE trying to terminate the contract hard and saying this continues and no further, that's going to be a hard sell, because basically what happened is in the barrier was put up with Panini filing the TRO, and he made it very clear. Or the TRO is by WWE. I'm sorry, Panini just opposed it. The TRO by WWE. Paul said TROs are insanely difficult to get.
Yeah.
And the burden of proof is on WWE. And because, and I made the question, I posted to him, and I've posted to other people, is if you're Panini, I mean, I think Elite was supposed to be the next release for next month. That's now been backed up into November. Apparently that move was made earlier in the week. I'm assuming in anticipation of what came down yesterday. Makes sense. But if you're, and I said this to Paul, and I agree it, and I say this also coming from the background, is I had a wrestling contract for 2 years, like I read the fine print in my contract, and if I, and if I felt that there was going to be a breach, and it never happened, but if I'm in a contract and I feel that I'm in the right, why would I put myself in a position to breach it? So a TRO, basically, my opinion is the only thing that stops the rest of the 23 releases is that TRO. Now, it may be a delayed timeline where we don't get till November. So where we had like November, late year, immaculate and impeccable releases, those don't come out till early 2024. But sans that judge granting that TRO, which the burden of proof is on WWE to do, and basically they're going to have to make their case for this whole thing up front to get that TRO.
Yeah, and it just
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, looking at the Panini response, I think is an indicator of kind of the direction that was taken. And I think you're right; it's going to be a tough sell. Going the fiscal way, I think, was completely I mean, we don't know the contract language, so we're speculating here. So let's put that out there first and foremost.
Absolutely, neither one of us are attorneys. Let's throw that disclaimer out there.
We're speculating.
Yeah, let's throw. We're all speculating.
I think there's a key element here, and that's, does WWE have the right to terminate the contract for cause with any number of different reasons?
Yeah.
And financially, maybe one of them, and that may just be the one Panini chose to respond to in their. So when you file a temporary restraining order and you go in there and you say, I want this injunction imposed to prevent product from going out while we figure out this legal case. Like, that's basically what WWE is saying, is like, we are not sending a cease and desist. We're not sending this. We're literally going to take legal action to ensure that while we sort this out legally, you're not going and making money off of our license.
Yeah.
Which I think, and for that purpose, I think it's a fair sort of understanding. Now, it's a fair understanding given that WWE had the right to terminate the contract, which I think is a really hard understanding to come to unless you're looking at the language. And I'm sure Panini has a million lawyers. WWE is infamous for their lawyers, Jerry McDivitt and all those guys.
I mentioned that as well. Yeah.
Like, I mean, like, there's history here. And to your point, Brandon, like, I don't see a way that Panini is actively putting in themselves in a breach of contract situation, especially in a financial situation during the hobby's largest era of boom in the history of the hobby. So I'm not sure where this is going, but it also may have just been that that's the specific piece of the TRO that Panini's responding to.
Yeah.
WWE's response is under seal, so we
Yep.
won't be able to see kind of how a lot of this is going to be going back and forth. And Elite being pushed back, I mean,
That goes
I
without
don't think
saying.
that's here there. Yeah, I don't think that's here nor there. I think what collector like really the big losers here, besides Panini, obviously, is the collector base.
Us.
And I think there is a very, very heavy chance that even with the judge siding with Panini and saying, no, I can't grant this restraining order, I can't grant this injunction to keep you from releasing product, I still think that there is a very difficult conundrum that Panini is going to face. And it comes down to a couple of different things. One, the autograph content that Panini gets is different in WWE than it is in a lot of the other sports. At least for Topps, and I'm assuming it's the same way for Panini, WWE facilitates a lot of that relationship. And if that relationship now is at the basis of legal action, Panini is going to have a very difficult time filling content for their products. And so that's number one. Number two, if Elite is fully now, we've seen Elite being signed. They probably had a big signing at SummerSlam. They probably have had signings here and there. Legends are probably going to be easier to get done because they're not having to go through WWE likely to get those done. Like that type of stuff could lead to some releases, but honestly, I think unless Topps is ready to jump in right away, Fanatics has been granted the license. So now you're saying, okay, I can't produce a Chrome product because that probably takes 4 to 6 months.
Yep.
I can't. I got to recycle a baseball design because I don't have a team ready to go. This wasn't expected. So I got to recycle a design or whip something up really fast. I got to get all the autographs signed. So it can't be on cards. Probably got to be sticker because I don't have the cards printed yet. I don't have any relics, so there's probably not going to be any relics involved, or I'll use the stuff I had from before. And then I got to get it printed. I got to get it packaged and everything. Like that's a 4 to 6 month time frame, and that's if they hustle. From now, that's being really conservative.
Yeah,
I think.
Go ahead. My apologies. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead, finish.
No, I'm just rambling. So I mean, like,
No.
I think if Topps jumps in like day one right now, like we're not getting product until after WrestleMania. So like, I mean, there's going to be a large gap between now and eventually the next wrestling release, and that's really problematic for collectors who are going to be starving for new content. If you're like me and try and collect everything, what are we going to do?
Right? Yeah, it's a we could potentially be staring down a black hole. You know what I mean? You know, and I kind of explained that with Paul when I was talking with him, like, I brought it into the wider perspective. Could we be staring down this for all sports? Because I think
we are.
I think the one thing Paul kind of brought this all back to was the fact that in actuality, and this is outside of our wrestling world, you know, in our wrestling fandom and our little niche corner of the hobby, this is just one bigger tentacle of the Fanatics Panini antitrust lawsuit. I find it wildly amusing.
Yeah.
I find it wildly amusing. We all got along for 5 days in Chicago at the end of July, and then the first dumpster fire started the week after, and it has literally been a series of dumpster fires since then. You know, that literally is throwing us all.
And Ruben's like, and I took that personally. And it's just like, now I'm going to get every contract canceled. And like, that's his right. I mean, like if he has that level of influence, and I think there's reason to believe that he does.
Yep.
And I mean, you see, like he's meeting with Adam Silver, he's meeting with like the commissioners. Like, there's reason to believe that this is going to happen across the hobby. And if you and Brandon, I know you work for RBI Crew, so like there's reason to believe that shops should be expecting that things are going to come to a grinding halt. If you're a breaker, if you're a shop, like you've got to start looking at contingency plans in case things go haywire. Now, the other thing is there were already probably 3 or 4 major legal proceedings that Panini's involved with, the antitrust suit, the NFLPA. Now we're adding at least 4 or 5 more with WWE. There's probably going to be an NBA thing thrown in here, UFC, you name it. Like, at what point is Panini going to just like run out of options in time and energy and resources to be able to legally fight every one of these battles? And it's not looking good. I mean, there's dark cloud. They were already dark clouds hanging over Dallas because the licenses were already decided. In 2026, this was
Mhm.
happening regardless.
Yeah.
But Michael Rubin's influence potentially bringing forth an apocalypse much earlier than that in Dallas, that's something that I don't think Panini was prepared for, or if they were, and that's why the antitrust lawsuit happened coming out of Chicago. Like, man, like there's a lot of stuff that's going to be happening that probably will prevent a smoother transition. Like I think this could be a really challenging time for both shops and collectors and for the manufacturers themselves, because if Fanatics is unable to release product because of the legal implications of them trying to terminate licenses early, collectors will find other places to spend their money when they could have, is that enough of a loss of money to counteract what would have been waiting? What, we're in 24, we're going to be in 2024 in a couple of months here.
Yeah.
So 2 years worth of revenue versus, hey, we're going to cut this off in the end of 23 and fight in court until 25. And maybe that, there's probably some projections there they did, but I think we're in for a very desolate winter here, and it's coming.
Paul brought up a couple of things and I think that can kind of maybe shed a little more light with this. We're going to know about the TRO, at least in his opinion. We're going to know about this TRO sooner rather than later. He said the average time for a hearing on the TRO is 2 to 3 weeks. So at least as of this morning, when we were talking this morning, recording for Top of the Card, a judge had still not been assigned to the case yet out of the Southern District of New York. So I think the TRO is going to be really step 2. One, we need to figure out what judge is taking this. It's got to be assigned. Then we get to the hearing in 2 to 3 weeks for the TRO. And then the second part he brought up with this is because all these lawsuits, and I mean, yeah, Fanatics is not in this, but Fanatics has a hand in this. This is a part of, like you said, a part of the broader scheme. These lawsuits are in so many different districts. He brought up a valid concern about consolidation from the legal aspect of getting all of these consolidated under one roof, because these are in so many different districts, federal districts throughout the country, that you're going to end up getting potentially getting
Dockets,
competing outcomes. One judge here says this, one judge here says that, another one says this. I do see that this could eventually come to a point sooner rather than later that these are all housed under one roof, under one judge. And instead of dealing with all of these as individual issues, which could potentially speed up the process, the grinding comes if they get consolidated under one roof and you just tackle the mountain at one time. And that doesn't take into account, and I said this to Paul, I said, and this doesn't take into account any potential federal oversight from the government
I think
stop all of this.
That's an inevitability. First of all, I think the government will absolutely have to get involved. Anytime there's antitrust lawsuits involved, I think the government will have eyes on it. Whether they actually exercise any oversight is probably still yet to be seen. But I think there's 2 outcomes here before we get into some of the questions, I'm sure, about things like redemptions. Like, there's 2 questions that every collector should have. And that's, one is there some path forward for Panini? And 2, what are the potential outcomes? And I think there is a path forward for Panini. There always is. Look at Leaf, look at Upper Deck. I think there is a path forward. It's a very narrow one, but there's a path. And the second question about, I think it all could come down to a settlement. And I think discovery in these situations, sharing publicly documents that would speak to all of these different things, the trade secrets, all of that stuff, I don't think it ever gets there. I think Panini, it's the Panini group in Italy is likely going to want to get this out of their hair as quickly as they can. Panini America has made themselves a very valuable commodity over the last 2 to 3 years as a grander scheme of the Panini group. It used to be the soccer stickers and all the other stuff that Panini used to do in Europe was by far their largest revenue driver. This boom period has changed a lot of that. But I still think the licenses already inevitably being gone in 26 I mean, at some point you got to cut your losses, take your settlement, walk away, and figure out a way to come back. I think that's the more likely outcome. I don't think the restraining order really has the impact that people are thinking it's going to have. Maybe, I mean, there's a potential that Panini just disregards a lot of this. What do they have to lose?
Yeah.
But I think overall, like, even if the judge grants the injunction and says, okay, the restraining order holds, you can't release product, like, it's a matter of giving them time for legally proceeding with things. Again, if Elite isn't 100% done, there's still content that WWE has to fulfill, and they're in the middle of this legal battle. Do you think WWE is going out of their way to help them? And they're in the middle of this
It's
merger. Like, there's so many things. It's so complex.
yeah, it's
I just
definitely an onion times 10 with this, because if I'm Panini, I'm not breaching a contract. So unless a judge steps in and says, do not do this, I'm not going to willingly breach a contract that we, from their end, we claim that we didn't violate to begin with. So why try to make more of WWE's case? So yeah, I delay off Elite a little bit. I still release it, unless that judge comes down with that TRO and says that WWE has filled that burden of proof, which is a high bar to begin with. I'm doing that. I spoke to Paul about this now because you've got this question. I've got this question. Redemptions, it's a huge thing. And you're absolutely right from the WWE end, and it may be something, I mean, obviously the contract is held up to this point. So, it's okay. We honor and sign the outstanding, for the year and a half of this
yeah,
contract. We facilitate getting those signed no matter what. And then they put up the barriers for everything else. Because I mean, we brought up this, I brought it up with Paul, the CD Lamb issue. I know it's a little different because WWE owns the IP. And I explained this to Paul. I said, it's not, like you're suing a person. You can't sue an intellectual property like that. I said, all these things are
right.
WWE IP. So it's going to have to go through corporate at the end of the day to try to get those
Yeah, it's
fulfilled.
different. It's a completely different situation than
Yeah.
what you have with NFL and MLB and NBA. And I think that the challenge that Panini is going to have getting these autographs filled is that WWE is the one that really drives a lot of that content.
Mm-hmm.
And even more so than that, like, Panini is probably on the verge of seeing class action lawsuits at their doorstep as it stands. Like, I think they've already probably closed on some of the already class action lawsuits that came through. But once the licenses are dead and once there's all these outstanding redemptions, they can't fill them with points anymore because they don't have cards to fill. I mean, like, there's all of these complex things that are going to come through in unprecedented hobby times.
Yeah.
Like this, like Fleer has gone bankrupt. We've seen what happened there in
Yep.
2002 and
Yep.
2003 and all going through that bankruptcy.
Yeah.
We've seen what happens when Upper Deck loses all their licenses. But I think overall, like, it's going to be much different when it's a legally binding, forceful exit. It's completely different. Upper Deck has gone through lawsuits too, but this feels different. Like, this
Yeah.
feels much more um, hard to manage from a Panini angle.
Yeah.
And I think those redemptions, if you're holding Triple H, Undertaker, those big names that are
Yeah.
going to be Roman Reigns, like, that are going to be multi-$100 cards, like, if you collect those people and you want those cards, you bought those cards because of the people on the redemption, like, you're playing Russian roulette in a lot of ways with those cards. If you're not tied to those and you want a football card, a basketball card, or something that Panini can fill right now, get them replaced as soon as you possibly can. I at this point, I just don't see a world where a company embroiled in legal action is going to facilitate autograph signings to help Panini fulfill content unless the judge orders them to as part of
Yeah.
a settlement. So, like, if you're saying, if you go into this restraining order and then this legal proceeding for the termination of the contract and they come to a settlement, and as part of that, WWE is saying, we will help facilitate these signings to get your outstanding autographs filled, then yes, that's a risk you would be willing to take for your outstanding redemptions. If the card is produced, it's sitting in somebody's office waiting to be signed, waiting for a sticker to be applied, that's usually okay, even if you don't have the license. Topps was fulfilling WWE redemptions for almost a full year after they lost the license, as long as the card is made. They're
Yep.
going back to a press to make a card. That's not usually okay. They don't do
Yep.
that.
And I know, having done some legwork, because I'll tell you, and this is kind of, I've got 9 redemptions sitting out right now. 8. I just
I have
got
a
one that
couple too, yeah.
shipped. But no, I've got, you mentioned 2 names. I have an Undertaker Immaculate Auto from last year. I'm waiting, and I know why they were waiting on it. It's printed. They needed Taker to sign it. Same
Yeah.
thing, like we talked about it last week. I have that Roman Reigns Disco Auto that they have shipped. So that I should be okay on. I just got to figure out how to push on them to get them to ship it to me, because they have the autos for it, because they've
Yeah,
already
that's
shipped them out
different.
into
That's a
live.
completely different.
Whole
Yeah, if
different
it's
situation.
live, yeah,
Yeah.
live cards, you
Yeah.
see them on eBay, go and redeem it as
Yeah.
quickly as you can.
Yeah.
Like that's
Exactly.
different.
Yeah.
We're
So
talking
it's,
about people that haven't signed yet. Like Cody Rhodes has some stuff outstanding. Triple H has a bunch of cards. Undertaker, like a lot of these cards from, especially the on card stuff. It's like one guy has to sign a dual or a quad or something like that.
yep.
Like that's usually where things are standing. But
Yep.
like Roman Reigns has impeccable stuff. Like there's a lot of big names that are still out there. Thankfully, this recent SummerSlam signing, they've gotten a lot of these things moving.
Yep.
And WrestleMania, they got a lot of the things moving. So there isn't a ton of it. There's people who have a lot because Roman Reigns is popular and these guys are popular. A lot of them were redeemed. But, Edge and, I forgot some of the other ones that were just recently filled.
Orton.
Ciampa and like, Orton. Well, Orton's one of the ones that's still outstanding. But, like, some of the guys that have recently had stuff filled, like that got done pretty quickly. Becky
Yep.
had a couple that were outstanding. She got done quickly. Like it's a risk every time you put that code in and hit enter. Like it's that you may not be getting it, and it's a sad reality, but it is what it is. And I think this will only exacerbate that situation if the card isn't live. You are playing with fire right now. I'm just saying.
Yeah. I think it goes back. If I'm Panini, and this is my opinion on it. I've been saying this since the Fanatics announcement of the license came in 2021. And then I said it again in 2022. I'm hinging a lot of my hope, I guess is the best we can say it, on government intervention. I firmly believe that this is a monopoly. We see it.
Possible.
They are taking over. They are literally trying to run everybody out of business. They even want to try to go after PSA, which I don't even know how they're going to be able to do that, if that's even possible. But they want to put everybody out of business. It is a full-on monopoly. And, I follow the worlds outside of the hobby. And I know for a fact that, in the current environment that we're in from a political standpoint, they are a firm believer in competition. I mean, they've been supporting the unions.
Absolutely.
They've been supporting the unions and the other between UPS and now, right now, as of recording, we're
with
in
the auto workers.
We're in the UAW strike. They believe in competition and busting up monopolies because it's not good for business.
Absolutely.
So I don't want to say I'm not hinging all of my hope on it. I'm also hoping that Discovery comes out, because, and I think I said this with Paul, I don't think WWE wants Discovery. And I'll say this, and you and I both know,
I don't think so either. Yeah.
You and I both know Jerry McDevitt has a great track record in court over the past 30 years. We've seen it, C&Ds all the time, man. But they have not been as successful in court in recent years. And I think the MLW lawsuit is a great place to kind of mark where.
But that's still not resolved yet, though.
Yeah,
like, there's no resolution there yet.
Yeah, but the thing is WWE's tried 3 times to get it thrown out of court. And like they've done, like they did with concussion lawsuits and all the other stuff, they've tried to get it thrown out of court just summarily. And it's happened time and time again. I think they've gotten to a point where WWE, and maybe this is, a Vince McMahon thing, where they feel that they can just act like we said with Ruben, they can act with impunity and not find out. And I think that, and once again, WWE left everything under seal. If anything does come public, it'll be heavily redacted. Obviously, trade secrets, things like that, we'll never see, which is fair enough. But the burden of proof, I think, in this situation, is on WWE at this point. When Panini has 3x'd the revenue that, and this is just from the monetary standpoint, they've 3x'd. There was never any conversations about, hey, you guys aren't honoring this contract properly when this supposedly, and once again, if WWE comes out with proof that says otherwise, my opinion changes. We'll change to it, of course. But when there's been no talk about them being unhappy about anything about this. And then you try to blindside it. It's like, wait a minute, we've honored all this. Panini being forthright, at least in terms of a round number, not throwing specific dollar numbers on it, but saying, we've done more with this in 18 months than Topps did with this in what, 5 to 6 years that they had it.
Yeah.
You know, it's a hard bargain to drive. And I think if you're Panini, you're going for broke at this point. Like, I understand it, you know, you're fighting multiple battles here. If it's going to need to get consolidated, but you fight on the hopes that eventually this gets picked up by the feds. They step in, and, you know, because I've always said, I think the ultimate end game to this at the end of the day, and ties into WWE and it ties into the overall, I think Fanatics gets busted up just like Facebook. It happened to
Yeah.
Facebook.
I think there's gonna be levels to this shit.
Yep.
Like, it's like,
Yeah. No.
I think Ruben, and we talked about this in our video last night at WTC, is like, Ruben has a playbook, and like, this is part of it. I think this is one of the industries that's not with small enough to avoid government oversight yet anymore. Used to be, I think.
Yep.
And I think, you know, right now there's still a lot of stuff outstanding. There's a lot of question marks. A lot of people don't know what's going on. Collectors, like, if you think about us, like, I've done my research on this and I'm still like 10% of the way there. Like, Paul is probably 60% of the way there, like, because he's a practicing lawyer. Like, there are, like, imagine people who are 1% of the way there. Like, they are clueless as to what's going on here across NFL, WWE, you name it. Like, most of the average collectors out there will never grasp what this means. They only care about what it means for the packs they rip, the redemptions that they've redeemed, and all that other stuff. I got 100 messages or whatever, 50 messages on Twitter and Instagram yesterday. Almost all of them were about redemptions. Like,
you and me both.
I think it's like, that's the natural response. I think people should probably expand their horizons, because in a lot of ways, this is going to impact them more than they probably will know.
Yes.
And they won't start to realize it until there's no product that's new product on shelves. The old product's going to be there. Like, steel, you'll be able to take some time off, fill those holes in your collection, like, go and seek this out. But, you know, you mentioned Panini has really done a tremendous job over the last 18 months with this. I mean, there's no, like, I was saying this on WTC last night, like, there are people who want to badmouth Panini. They want to badmouth this, that, and the other thing. But, and I think all four of the people on the video were in agreement. Like, you can be a hater, you can be all these people that you want to be, you can cry all you want, but listen, like, it's been universal. It's not just the Panini stuff that's been successful. It's the indie stuff. It's Topps stuff. It's Upper Decks AEW stuff. Like, all of what Panini has brought to this has related to a growth in the wrestling card hobby, because there's more people, there's more eyes, there's more focus, the product's getting better, you know, all of this stuff. And like, I think, you know, we've seen more content, your content, Card Foundation, WTC, like, all these guys are coming and bringing awesome stuff. Zan Morning, like, all these guys are coming and doing amazing stuff. And not saying that they weren't there before, but maybe they're getting more attention now because there's just more people. We were able to do the main event in the NSCC. Like, all of that type of stuff is really a direct result of having more support within the hobby. And I think that having Panini join the hobby and bring their hordes of sort of eyes with it has been nothing but awesome. Now, it could have been all of that with the shittiest products that exist. And in reality, the products have been tremendous. And I think they've given Topps, if Topps is eventually going to take this over, whether it's now or in 26 or whenever, like, they've given them a roadmap to success. Maybe for the first time ever, maybe we get, you know, Topps Dynasty WWE. Maybe we get, you know, Luminaries. Maybe we get some of the other stuff. Like, all of these things that were not possible because they weren't willing to do player worn stuff, or they weren't knowing how to expand checklists to the point, or they didn't have the funding to do it because the budgets were smaller. All of that's different now. And I think Panini has brought all of that to the forefront. Now, the flip side of that, if you're expecting $60 Chrome boxes to come back, probably you're looking at the wrong universe. But it's like, those are the fun things about this new era of wrestling card collecting. And I think we have Panini really to thank for that. And
Lucas, I mean, I've said it to him personally. I've said it publicly.
Me too.
Lucas, his team, but him being the person that leads this license, Um,
They've
you know,
done a
and
tremendous job.
I like to put it in this analogy is we talk about bookers in the wrestling industry, and when you have a booker that's booking wrestling that doesn't know jack about wrestling, you have a guy who's a wrestling fan running a wrestling product. It has literally been the best thing to happen to the wrestling card hobby ever, in my opinion. I would say, and it's led to such a almost a parabolic shift in business and in
100%.
collecting in 18 months. And I think that's one of the things that floored me the most with this. It's like, man, like this is just a cash cow. Like, you guys keep printing these products for the next 4 years and you guys just take my money,
And it
and
might take another 5 to 10 years before people truly recognize. I mean, there's only going to be two prisms. There's only going to be two selects. There's going to be one immaculate. There's going to be so few of these cards to go
yep.
around. And as time progresses and people like Roman Reigns set records and these guys and people pass away and whatever, like these on card autographs and these dual autographs and these content from all these products, there's not going to be a lot of it, and it's going to go quickly and be stashed in collections forever. Like wrestling collectors hoard things and they
Yeah,
keep
we do.
things. I know I do.
Yeah, we
So
do.
like all of that stuff is like, man, this is going to be looked back on. Somebody on Twitter said that this is going to be looked back on like it's a cheap, whatever, and no one's going to care. I'm like, you could not be further from this truth. Panini
Yeah.
could go away tomorrow, and their legacy in the hobby is so much that it wouldn't like this. It's gonna like we talk about Fleer, and Fleer's been gone for 20 years.
Yep.
So I mean, like I think just to wrap this up because
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I think we've sort of covered it, but honestly, this era in wrestling cards has been incredible, and
Yeah.
it's sad that it's coming to an end 2 years early. But I
Yeah.
think it's one that will be remembered for just some of the epic success that it's had.
Yep. I'm holding out hope that we get products with it. I'm a firm believer. Like once again, I have the background of having a contract and having had to honor a contract for 2 years, when I
Right.
was with Impact, of knowing I'm not going to breach that. So I'm holding out hope that sans the TRO, we still get it. Time will tell, obviously, with it. I think the last question I have for you to kind of put a bow on all of this, probably the only thing we haven't talked about, is I look today because I could say this from working at the shop. When that NFLPA announcement came out, man, it was like a bank run on football wax. Do you think we're going to see that kind of a movement when it comes to the Panini wax that's out there right now? And then do you see the prices in terms of singles? I don't want to say going parabolic, but I go back to when when you brought me on your podcast and we talked about Revolution, and we were talking about $100 Undertaker autos or $120 Undertaker autos, saying, "Oh, wait till it goes back to tops. If we don't get Undertaker and anything but Transcendent, the price is going to go up on them." Do we start seeing things like that early?
Um, Man, that's a tough question. I think that the breakers. So I don't think it's going to be a result of Panini losing the license. I think it's going to be a result of product being non-existent. So
Supply.
I think what happened with Topps is during COVID in 2020, we had Road to WrestleMania come out in January, and there wasn't another readily available product until like September, October. In between, then wax prices just went through the roof because people had nothing to rip, and so they were ripping through everything that they could find. So boxes that were $40 went to $100 because they couldn't find them. So I think there's going to be a run at some point. If we don't get new product, then yes, that's going to happen.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's going to be because Panini is leaving. It's going to be because people are going to want to rip something and there's not going to be anything to rip. So they're going to go back to Prism. They're going to go back to Select. They're going to go back to all these boxes. And then when those get ripped to shreds because of whatnot, because of all the breakers, they're going to start going back to other stuff like Revolution. Like everything is going to go up. And it would be my prediction, at least if it happens the way that it did with Topps and COVID. If it goes differently just because there's more of the product out there, it may go up a little bit. It may not go up. I really have no idea. We've never gone through this before. But I think that the collectors should be prepared for anything. And I think if there's one thing that I do know is that once sort of the wax sort of settles in at its price, it rarely goes way down. If anything, especially with the
Yeah.
chrome style products, they tend to go up more than
Mhm.
anything over time.
Yeah.
So holding wax, that's why people do it. That's why people have closets and rooms full of unopened wax. I know all of my wrestling friends, that's what they do. They don't rip wax. They just keep by. There you go. You just box after box after box. So I think like it's never a bad idea to keep the sealed wax as long as, you're not overextending your financials. Like I'm not an advisor. I don't do this for a living.
Yep.
That was just my experience in 2020 when
Yep.
there was nothing coming out. We literally tore through everything and there was no
Yep.
whatnot. There was no breakers that were doing this. Now there is, and they've got to feed their families somehow. So they're going to keep tearing through stuff. Eventually the reorders are going to get more and more expensive.
I think we see it. I think for wax, we see it maybe more long term. If there's going to be an immediate price jump up front, I think it's going to be on the high end stuff on iMac and Impact, especially if we only get 1 year of it because there is a shorter run of it. I think with Prism and Select, we may start seeing that with like Select 22. I don't think we see maybe much of a move. I think Prism 22 is the last to move because there are so many people that were holding on to it because their buy-in price was $800 to $900 a box.
That's the problem. I think I'm saying pricing right now, like as people need stuff to rip, like the reorders of readily available stuff is going to be tougher to find.
Yep.
Just because breakers need to have stuff on camera and it's harder and harder to find it. So,
yep.
But thanks for having me on, man. Yeah, I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I guarantee this won't be the last time we're getting together as things move forward with this because this has got the set to be a very prolonged issue, and we're all going to be along for the ride. So
yeah,
thank you very much, my friend, for joining me, guys. Give him a follow. He's got his socials right there on the screen at WB Gellman on Instagram, at SC Uncensored on Twitter. You guys know where to find me. If you want to see all the details from my conversation with Paul Lesko, check it out over on top of the card on the ad-free platform. And that'll do it for this. The dumpster fire has been set, and now we just get to sit back and see how fast is this fire going to get put out?
I got some s'mores.
Yeah, you know what? I'll bring the graham crackers. All right, we'll do it all up. Right, so, guys, thank you so much for joining me, guys. We'll see you on the next one, round and third, and heading for home. See you later.